There is body after body after body being pulled from Lady Bird Lake. There are people who are adamant there is a serial killer working in Austin, specifically on Rainey Street, which is where the college bars are. There are over a dozen dead men who have been pulled from the lake in the last 2 years. If that weren't strange enough, a couple of months ago, a man called the Austin police and told them, "I'm a serial killer and I want to turn myself in." This man has nothing to do with the bodies that are being pulled out of Lady Bird Lake. When you find out what this man has done for decades, each time being let out of prison, it's gonna make your blood boil. Today we are asking the question, what is going on in Austin? I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it.
As a retired FBI agent, found out about a potential serial killer case in Austin, Texas, and it is terrifying.
There's a serial killer in Austin, Texas.
The serial killer is apparently in Austin, Texas.
Citizens are convinced that there is a serial killer out there because in the last 2 years there have been 12 bodies.
Yesterday, July 5th, a body was found here on Rainey Street, right at this trail near Lady Bird Lake.
You guys, how at this point can this all just be a coincidence?
Let's talk about how in the past 2 years, 12 bodies have mysteriously been found in an Austin, Texas lake.
You were just saying you go running at like midnight sometimes.
Well, not anymore because of the Rainey Street Rippers out there.
So some recent news in the Austin serial killer saga.
They closed the way from Rainey Street to Lady Bird Lake with these fences.
There are a lot of people convinced there's a serial killer. I want to give you a feel for the vibe of this area. It's very much a park atmosphere, but kind of wild at the same time. The banks of the river aren't like well kept. They just kind of gradually slope into the lake. Austin is such a cool city. They actually have lockers all along the lake, so people can come down out of the skyscrapers on their lunch breaks and take their suits off and throw on a swimsuit, go paddleboarding on their lunch break, and then put their suit back on and go back to work. It's a very chill city. The vibes are immaculate. Along the lake, there are always people sitting and eating lunch, laying on blankets, listening to music, playing frisbee. If I could pick my entire family up and move to Austin, I just might do that. It has everything. Great food, great live music, great nightlife, great weather, great hiking, great outdoor activities. The only thing that sucks about Austin, well, besides the humidity, is the traffic. People talk about Southern California. It ain't got nothing on Austin. Austin is a city that was never meant to have 2 million people living there. And so the way they built the freeways, there's nowhere for them to go. There's no room for expansion. All they can do is build these big sweeping freeways that go around the outside of the city. But that doesn't help at all downtown. If you're wanting to go somewhere in downtown Austin, walking or riding a bike is faster than a car. You will sit in traffic for an hour to go 4 blocks at certain times of the day. Austin is a beautiful, lush, green city. It's very diverse. It's very unique. It's a little weird, and everybody just kind of does their own thing. But lately, every time I open up my TikTok or my news apps, I'm seeing something about Austin. Is there a serial killer stalking this great American city? They are calling this killer the Rainey Street Ripper. So let's talk about Rainey Street. In Austin, there is a street called 6th Street. Austin is set up as 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. And then SoCo, South Congress, runs the opposite direction, and it's a main thoroughfare. Lamar is another one of the main thoroughfares. South Congress takes you right down to the state capitol. 6th Street is where all the action happens. Every Friday night and every Saturday night, they close the street down to traffic, and you're able to just wander around between the bars bars and the restaurants. It's like a little Mardi Gras, a little mini Mardi Gras every Friday and Saturday night. There's great live music. I mean, some of the best live music from people you've never heard of and never will, that you will ever hear anywhere. The names of the bars change a lot. The bars change hands a lot. But we always liked Darwin's because it was really chill and the music there tended to be really good. We liked the Jackalope sometimes. There was a place called Handlebar. I don't know if that's there anymore. But then if you go east on 6th, you hit what's called the Dirty Six. It's more biker bars and local bars, not so touristy. And it's a little sketchy down there. When you walk from touristy 6th Street, there's this kind of length of sidewalk where some abandoned buildings and fields are, and you're like, okay, let's quickly get to the bar. We would always walk down there to go to the White Horse. We loved that place because it always had great music. And then there was another place we liked down there. I can't remember the name of it. It had something to do with bees. But running in the opposite direction of touristy 6th Street is Rainey Street. And this is where the younger crowd hangs out, the college kids. Rainey Street, well, first of all, it has Bangers. Bangers is this amazing place where they make these gourmet hot dogs from scratch. And when I say gourmet, I mean like the hot dog is made of duck meat with like foie gras and, really gourmet cheeses in it. But Bangers itself is an outdoor space with a dirt floor and picnic tables. On the weekends, they roast a whole hog in the pit and they have the best boiled peanuts on earth. But also along Rainey Street are a lot of food trucks and a lot of college bars. Jason and I went to Rainey Street a couple of times, and every time we were like, we always felt really, really old there. The thing that is the most unique about Rainey Street is that the bars are in old houses. So you're walking along the street and it looks like a neighborhood, but in the houses are bars. I remember one called Eisenhower's. There's one called Lucille's. They are tiny little bars and you're like partying in somebody's old living room. Some of them are kind of douchey and everyone there is plastered. They're the type of places that are like a disco ball in the middle of the little tiny room and then like a pink plastic moose head on the wall, There's always a DJ, never live music. There's no room for a live band. We prefer live bands, so we didn't spend a lot of time down there. But I just want to give you a feel for the area. Needless to say, people on Rainey Street get very, very drunk. And like I said, there's a huge traffic problem there. You're not going to pay for an Uber if you're a college student, because if you buy an Uber, you're going to sit in that Uber for an hour to go a few blocks, and that's going to cost you a lot of money. College kids are broke, so a lot of them end up walking home. You're true crime connoisseurs, drunk people and walking home late at night, bad idea. Now, it is not uncommon for someone to be drunk walking downtown along Lady Bird Lake and, they fall in. Let's talk very briefly about Lady Bird Lake. The lake is actually part of the Colorado River. It's named after Lady Bird Johnson because she kind of revitalized the area, even put her own money into it. Some people call it Town Lake. You cannot swim in Lady Bird Lake. It's actually illegal because there are really swift undercurrents and rocks and boulders and things are shifting all the time, so it's dangerous. You can, however, like I said, rent kayaks and paddle boards and like those swan boats. Jason and I would go kayaking on a Sunday afternoon. It's a good time. The lake covers 500 acres, but it's only about 20 feet deep. There are massive bass in this lake, massive, and critters as well. There have even been alligators. But being so shallow, you can see why it would be easy if a body were to be dumped there for it to come to the surface. Now, let's take a look at this map. There have been 12 bodies pulled from Lady Bird Lake since 2022. 12 bodies in 1.5 years. I don't care who you are, that's a lot of bodies in a lake. Law enforcement is adamant these deaths are not connected. I want to show you a TikTok made by an Austin reporter that works for a TV station, vehemently denying that these deaths are connected.
Okay, so this post has been a long time coming, but I really need to set the record straight that there is no serial killer in Austin, Texas, near Rainey Street and or throwing bodies into Lady Bird Lake. Hello, my name is Brianna Hollis, and I am a crime reporter for KXAN News, the NBC affiliate in Austin, Texas. There is so much misinformation out there, and people with this misinformation driving the conversation. I was semi-recently on a Nancy Grace podcast about this, where professionals in the legal and law enforcement realm were also perpetuating this information, and facts that I had used that came directly from autopsy reports that debunked some of these arguments that were being made weren't even used. So my scope of knowledge is from 2022 to date, and according to all of our reporting, there have been 10 bodies pulled from Lady Bird Lake in that time period. For context, Lady Bird Lake is huge and it goes through all of downtown, and for people who aren't familiar with Austin, it more so functions as a river, and the span in which bodies were found is about 2 miles long. From my personal experience, talking to police, digging through documents, talking to a lot of family members of these victims, and talking to people in the area, there is no link. There's this thought out there that somehow all of these cases are connected and they all have similar circumstances and demographics and whatnot, and that is frankly just not true. So how did Rainey Street get involved in this? Well, there were a bunch of anonymous posts on Reddit and other social media platforms from people claiming to be drugged on Rainey Street. And sure, at the same time, around some of those postings, there were a couple of these instances, again, only 10 since the beginning of 2022, where bodies were found in the lake. There were no connections between the material in those posts and the bodies that were being found in the lake. But there was a social media frenzy wanting to connect all of these things. Since the beginning of 2022, only 2 bodies were found near Rainey Street. Obviously, tragic cases. These 2 were similar in the sense that it was 2 young men last seen by their friends on Rainey Street, and then police ended up pulling their bodies from the lake. In those 2 cases, there were no drugs in the system, only alcohol. I will tell you, if somehow it turns out, even though none of the evidence points to this, if it turns out that police were lying about this the entire time, I will be knocking on that door first thing in the morning. I will be front and center at that press conference, pushing for answers, asking why this went on like this. But I just do not think that that's the case. When I say I don't think that's the case, I'm saying as a crime reporter who's embedded with all of these facts, none of it is pointing to the fact that people are claiming widespread across the country. In other countries, BBC even asked me to talk about the serial killer, okay? There is no serial killer in Austin.
Some conspiracy theorists believe these reporters are a little too adamant, and maybe they're working with the police to try to calm the public. I don't know if I believe that. The cops have gone to the media time and time again, insisting these deaths are accidental drownings. People are walking home, they're intoxicated, and they fall in the lake. That's a lot of drunk guys falling into the lake. Also, like I said, this is a gradual slope. It's not a cliff. If you go into the lake on this gradual, slope in, I mean, there are a couple places where it's a few feet down. Why don't you just get back out of the lake? Yes, there are some bridges. I can see how someone could fall off a bridge. Let's talk about some of the victims. This is 38-year-old Jeff Jones. Jeff was on a bachelor party trip to Austin in 2023. He was out partying with friends. He'd come from Boston, and there were about a dozen of them. Jeff says that 1 minute he was in a bar having a good time, and the next, nothing. He was completely blacked out. Someone had drugged his drink, and he has absolutely no memory of anything after standing in the bar with his friends. Jeff woke up in the hospital 2 weeks later with metal rods holding his back together, and he had the date rape drug Rohypnol in his system. It's weird. Jeff Jones is convinced he is a victim of the Rainey Street Ripper. Jeff was led away from the bar after he was drugged and pushed off of a bridge. He fell 25 feet and landed on the ground. Had he landed in the water, he would have drowned. Jeff says he feels lucky to be alive, even though he sustained very serious injuries. Someone spotted Jeff lying at the foot of the West 6th Street Bridge and called the police. Jeff suffered 7 broken vertebrae, his 3rd to his 7th, and the 22nd and the 13th. He broke his shoulder, his elbow, and 2 ribs, and he was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. He still has no memory of that night. Each time the police pull a body from Lady Bird Lake, they attribute it to drowning. Body after body is ruled no foul play, and people are just saying why. On April 1st, Jonathan Honey was found near 10 Rainey Street. 2 weeks later, Christopher Hayes Clark was found. On June 27th, Mogo Dogale was pulled out near West Cesar Chavez. Currently, there is a Reddit user claiming that a man confessed to him in a bar that he was murdering people and he was going to places that are popular for queer people. A percentage of the men pulled from the lake are gay. Despite all of this, the police refute claims that any of these deaths are linked. In February of 2024, a woman was pulled from the lake. She is the only female in this group of deaths, and she remains unidentified. Some of the men, like Clifton Axtell, don't even have a cause of death. Some of these men did not drown, they were not shot, they were not strangled, and even those deaths have been ruled as non-suspicious. I'm not sure how you find a young man dead in a lake and you can't find a cause of death and you say that's not suspicious. The last body pulled from the lake was several months ago in April 2024. On April 13th, 2024, the Austin police issued this tweet saying a deceased person was found floating in the lake near Pleasant Valley Road. This person has not been identified. In fact, all 3 people found in 2024, 1 in February and 2 in April, remain unidentified. I'm curious to know what you think about this. Do you think people are just getting drunk and falling into the lake? Or do you believe the Rainey Street Ripper is real? We've got a second story coming out of Austin. It's 1982. 8-year-old Kendra Page is just riding her little bike around on a playground. She's just enjoying the day, being a little girl, riding her bike. I can tell I'm already getting mad. Raul Meza Jr. walks up to this little baby, rips her off her bike, sexually assaults her, murders her, and throws her in a dumpster. I've talked before about how my attitudes towards these kinds of criminals have changed lately. This is the type of guy, string him up, cut off his balls, cover him in honey, and let the ants at him. Make it slow, make it painful, and then turn him over to the family. The family doesn't want to do it, somebody else will. I've lost some of my humanity. I'm the first person to admit it. Look at this beautiful little girl and tell me I'm wrong. For whatever reason, Raul Meza Jr. then walks into the police station and confessed to what he did. He gets sentenced to 30 years and does only 11 of them because of, hold on to your butts, good behavior. This man raped and murdered a baby and he got out of prison early for good behavior. Of course, this piece of shit claims he had a terrible childhood, that he was abused. He started using drugs when he was only 8 years old. A lot of people have that history. They don't do shit like that. In 1975, when Raul Meza was only 16 years old, he robbed a convenience store on South Congress. It was New Year's Eve, and he shot the clerk, a man named Durley Ramirez. The man survived, and then Raul got 20 years for that crime. He got paroled in 1981, and then the next year he killed Kendra. So we just keep letting these monsters out of prison. When Raul gets out of prison and the neighborhood finds out, he moves into this neighborhood and the people find out who he is, they are not having it.
The new year, 1982, was just a few days old when police discover the body of a young girl in a dumpster. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered, ambushed while riding her bicycle on an elementary school playground. She was 3rd grader Kendra Page. Her death set Austin on edge. Parents stopped letting their kids walk to school. Big crowds gathered at neighborhood meetings to find ways to keep kids safe. Then, just a few days after police found Kendra's body, 21-year-old Raul Meza went to APD headquarters to turn himself in. He confessed to Kendra's murder. To avoid a trial and a possible death sentence, Meza's attorneys and the Travis County DA's office struck a deal. Meza would serve a 30-year prison sentence. But just 12 years later, 1993, Meza was released from prison early, earning credit for good behavior. While on parole, he was transferred to halfway houses across the state, where there were protests always. It was clear that no one wanted Meza for a neighbor when he returned to Austin to live in his mother's home. Meza took the unusual step of calling a news conference to say that he should not be feared, that he had changed while in prison.
There is nothing that I can do to change my past. I can only tell you that in my heart, I know that I will not willfully bring harm to anyone.
But Meza was sent to prison again in 1994 for violating a midnight curfew. He was released in 2002, and it's during those 20 years since the prison release that now has law officers looking closely at other crimes that Meza committed, crimes that have him back in custody once again.
I love how he called a press conference to tell people that he's not dangerous. Oh, okay, everything's fine. It's all good. The baby rapist and killer says he's not dangerous. Nothing to see here. Even the professionals that had worked with Raul in prison said, this man is dangerous, don't let him out of prison. They did it anyway. Raul is sent back to prison in 1994 for violating his parole, and he wasn't released again until 2016.
KXAN's Brianna Hollis and Dalton Huey spoke with Mesa's former therapist who assessed him from prison decades ago. And she wanted to warn others he may seem charming, but the interview she conducted still gives her chills.
That's what I learned meeting Raul, was that I was in the world of a completely different animal.
In connection with 2 murders and believe he may be linked up to 10 more.
I was watching the news and I remember his picture coming on.
Vivian Lewis says she met Raul Meza working as a therapist within the criminal justice system. And tell us, what your experience was like with him.
The parole board had asked me to do an assessment and evaluation of his danger to the community.
She conducted that assessment while Meza was in prison for the murder of 8-year-old Kendra Page. What was he like?
What was he like? He had what I would now call a false charm. He was very engaging, talkative, willing to explicitly describe his crime against Kendra.
Lewis retired almost 10 years ago. Her interview about Page's murder still gives her chills.
Iciest, most blood-curdling interview I had been in.
Risk factors for violence are the factors that make a person more likely to commit the violence.
Dr. Nancy Zars, a forensic psychologist, can't comment on Meza's case directly, but she gave us insight on how certain characteristics make someone more likely to commit crimes.
And that is young age, male gender, past history of violence, antisocial / psychopathy, substance abuse, and serious mental illness.
For Meza, some of these risk factors started when he was just a kid. According to archived newspapers, Meza started using drugs at just 8 years old. Another psychologist quoted in these old articles called Meza, quote, an intensely lonely youngster. These same archives also unveiled these details about Meza's criminal history. Police first arrested teenage Mesa in 1973 on shoplifting and burglary charges. The next year, authorities accused him of arson after a fire at a junior high school. That incident sent him to Giddings State School, a juvenile corrections facility where he reportedly ran away. Then, in 1975, when Meza was 16, a judge sentenced him as an adult to 20 years in prison for aggravated robbery in the shooting of a convenience store owner. While on parole for that crime, he murdered Kendra Page.
The fact that somebody's coming in and out of prison indicates that there is repeated illegal behavior. Oftentimes, that behavior tends to accelerate over time. So their crimes tend to get a little bit more severe.
He's a deadly person, and he has been since adolescence.
In 1993, after Meza got released from prison after killing 8-year-old Page, he tried to convince the public he had changed.
There is nothing that I can do to change the past. I can only tell you that in my heart, I know that I will not willfully bring harm to anyone.
The most impacting thing about Raul was how engaging he could be.
Upon revisiting her time with Mesa,
Listen to my voice crack.
Lewis kept coming back to the same thought.
I was dealing with a psychopath.
So this guy is out now for years, and there are people that believe he has been killing the entire time. Now, this case is still ongoing. We will have to do a follow-up. But what we know is that in 2019, 66-year-old Gloria Lofton was found dead in her home. The police attended the death and ruled it as suspicious. No one was ever charged. An autopsy was performed on Gloria, and it was ruled as an inconclusive death. Gloria's relatives say that the police provided them with very few details. The family kind of came to believe that Gloria had had too much to drink and she fell and died. Later on, Gloria's family would become furious with the Austin police because they found out that the cops had missed a note at Gloria's death scene that would have led them to her killer. The family did not know at the time that the note was important. They didn't know of this Raul Meza guy and that he had such a record. Gloria's family just gathered her things up and put this note with them and stored it away. So as Gloria's family is grieving, Raul Meza continues to kill. Then on May 23rd, 2023, Raul Meza does what he had done in the 70s. He called the Austin Police Department and said, "I'm a murderer." He said he had killed Jesse Froga. On May 20th, the Pflugerville police, Pflugerville is a suburb of Austin, were sent to do a welfare check on Campfire Trail. Jesse Froga's niece called the police and said she hadn't spoken to her uncle since May 11th, and she was worried about him. She said they spoke almost every day and it had been way too long. The police enter the home and immediately see dried blood. Then they found bloody knives in the living room. Finally, they find 80-year-old Jesse Froga dead inside his home. Jesse had been murdered. His story is actually very tragic. Jesse had lived in the home with his wife and his adult son, and both his wife and his adult son had died of COVID. So Jesse's now alone, and he meets Raul Meza, and he lets this man move in with him. He's probably lonely. He figures this guy's a little younger. He can help out. And they shared the house until May 12th when Raul moved out. Raul calls the police and says, "Hey, I effed up." The police immediately begin to collect evidence at the scene. They find blood. They find bloody cigarette butts. They find blood on his shoes. They find blood inside Jesse's truck that Raul had been driving. Raul tries to tell the cops that he didn't mean to kill the old man. Raul told the police where he was, and they went to him and arrested him. Raul then comes up with some story about how somebody promised him 25% of the inheritance they were going to get from Jesse if he would kill Jesse. And then Raul just openly admits to a double murder he committed in San Antonio years earlier. Not a lot of information has been released on that murder because, like I say, this is still ongoing. As it stands right now, police in Austin are working with other police departments in Texas to tie Raul Meza to 10 suspected homicides. Homicides they think he is tied to. This guy has had chance after chance, and he just keeps killing. And this is Texas. You'd think they'd have locked the baby killer up for the rest of his life back in, 1982. The fact that this guy was ever let out of prison makes my blood boil. And here we are, decades later, with more death and more tragedy.
This morning, an accused serial killer returned to a Travis County courtroom. Raul Meza Jr. is charged with 2 murders decades after he killed an 8-year-old girl in Austin back in 1982. The victim's families say they want to make sure Mesa is held accountable. Here's KVU's Darrenisha Heron.
It was a quick hearing on the long road to justice for these families of victims of accused serial killer Raul Meza Jr. Meza was escorted to the front of the courtroom, where the judge reset his hearing because the state is still reviewing evidence. Meza didn't say a word.
Nothing needs to be taken care of. You can stay at Del Valley. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's a bold-faced coward. So he couldn't even look up at us or anyone in the room. So I feel that shows,
he's in here for the long haul.
Christina Foltz is the daughter of Gloria Lofton, who was killed in 2019. But police say Mesa didn't confess to her murder until this year. There for support, other families who say Mesa ruined their lives.
So they're here in unison to support and show support for these cases and, let this man know that he's not going to get away with this.
Authorities say Mesa also confessed to killing Jesse Froga in Pflugerville earlier this year, as well as a double murder in San Antonio that's being investigated. Mesa was convicted of murdering 8-year-old Kendra Page in the 80s, but only served about 12 years in prison before being released for good behavior. Mesa's defense attorney, Russ Hunt Jr., did not say if Mesa was remorseful, but did say that Mesa is trying to stay out of prison.
And he obviously doesn't want to be incarcerated, that's not any place anyone would want to be, and so he is trying to figure out what his best options are at this point.
Hunt says it's too early to talk plea deals, but if they do go to trial, it wouldn't happen until next year or later.
No plea deal, and definitely the death penalty. This man's been ruining generations of lives through decades, so we're going to hopefully make it stop.
Mesa is due back in court January 17th, and Foltz says they will attend every one until justice is served.
As of today, it's the first week of August as I'm recording this, Raul Meza is set to appear in court again on August 27th. We will know more after that. For now, all we can do is send our love to those that are affected by this monster's terrible acts. I know I speak for all of us in our community when I say we are so sorry for what you've been through. To have your loved ones taken by this evil man and the failures of the Texas justice system. I will be watching this case and I will update you as we know more. Same with the Rainey Street Ripper. I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I sure appreciate you spending a little bit of your day with me. Hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, listen to the podcasts. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and you can also join my Patreon. Some of you give a few dollars a month to help keep the episodes coming, and I greatly appreciate you. You can also be part of our fundraiser. There's a video here on my channel simply titled Fundraiser. You can watch this little short video. It explains everything our community is doing to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that's never been tested. We are trying to help solve a cold case. I hope you're well. I hope you're hanging in there. And if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, I want you to remember something. Every challenge you've ever faced, every hard time you've ever been through, you got through it. And if you're struggling right now, you'll get through that too. I'm sending you lots of love and lots of support. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.